Suicides among young people continue to be a serious problem. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for children, adolescents, and young adult age, 15 to 24 years old. The majority of children and adolescents who attempt suicide have a significant mental health disorder, usually depression. Thoughts about suicide and suicide attempts are often associated with depression. In addition to depression, other risk factors include among young children, suicide attempts are often impulsive. They may be associated with feelings of sadness, confusion, anger, or problems with attention and hyperactivity. Among teenagers, suicide attempts may be associated with feelings of stress, self-doubt, pressure to succeed, financial uncertainty, disappointment, and loss. For some teens, suicide may appear to be a solution to their problems.
Is it okay to sacrifice your own pleasure to the happiness of the majority?
Yes,
Why?
because when we are going to base on this utilitarianism, it is morally right to sacrifice your own self to cause a greatest pleasure. In the situation, the victim killed herself to escape from the suffering. And also, he thinks that killing his own self can lessen the family problem and can cause happiness to his family. But in reality, it is immorally wrong. In conclusion, it is all because of depression.
According to utilitarianism, an action's goodness is determined by its impact on others as well as on the self. As a result, I examined that data shows suicide as negative emotional, interpersonal, and economic consequences for both people and society. In the end, the rightness or wrongness of committing suicide cannot be assessed without considering the broader consequences of that decision.
No, because if suicide leads to greater suffering such as grieving or pain of the family and friends, it is considered unethical. If the actions produces unhappiness or pain sa kadaghan kay tatawag naton siya as morally wrong. So if it is unethical or morally wrong, suicide should be forbidden so we can lessen the cases of suicide.
So, suicide is a violation of our moral duty to honor the value of life. Even if it gives a better pleasure to the one that commits suicide, but in the view of utilitarian, suicide is morally forbidden. If suicide leads to greatest suffering, such as grief of the family and friends.
According to utilitarianism, morally right or wrong depends on the offense. Obviously, committing suicide is unethical, but most people committed suicide to escape from pain or suffering.
The natural law requires that human life be preserved and be protected. Suicide clearly does not save or defend human life. As a result, killing oneself is irrational and cannot be part of God's purpose for our lives. Thus, it is ethically undesirable.
No, because I believe committing suicide is unethical and according to protect and preserve life, every living being will do everything it can to stay alive. Committing suicide is an attempt that someone will end his or her life, and in order to stop someone from committing suicide, there should be someone who will support, ready to listen, never abandon the person who is suicidal, and love them unconditionally. Because every living being have a purpose, and that is to survive. I believe we do not need anyone to tell us what is right and what is wrong. We know that suicide is a bad idea and it is morally wrong. So surviving is good, staying alive is good, and every living thing must protect and preserve its life.
Suicide is wrong because it violates our moral obligation to respect the inherent value of human's life. In regards to its value to others or to the person whose life is being taken. As a result, the sanctity of life, perspective on suicide is the ontological one. Suicide is a violation towards the agent's duty to himself.
So, the deontological argument from the sanctity of life, hence, suicide is wrong because it violates our moral duty to honor the inherent value of human life, regardless of the value of that life to others or to the person whose life it is. The sanctity of life view is thus a deontological possession on suicide. For Kant, suicide is a violation towards an agent's duty to himself. Not to commit suicide is a perfect duty, which means that is a absolute prohibition. For Kant, suicide is immoral because it is the violation of the humanity, which is an objective end. Deontology, the other moral theory, states that an action theory states that an action, for example, euthanasia, which is related to suicide, is good or bad for a reason other than the consequences of the action. Suicide is the leading cause of death among school-age youth. However, suicide is preventable. Youth who are contemplating suicide frequently give warning signs of their distress. Parents, teachers, and friends are in the key position to pick up on these signs and get help. Most important is to never take these warning signs lightly or promise to keep them secret. When all adults and students and the school community are committed to making suicide prevention a priority and empowered to take the correct action, we can help youth before they engage in behavior with irreversible consequence. What to do? Youth who feel suicidal are not likely to seek help directly. However, parents, school, personnel, and peers can recognize the warning signs and take immediate action to keep the youth safe. When a youth gives signs that they may be considering suicide, the following actions should be taken. What you can do if someone's suicidal. Ask the youth directly if he or she is thinking about suicide. Focus in your concern for their well-being and avoid being accusatory lesson. Reassure them that there is help and they will not feel like this forever. Do not judge. Provide constant supervision. Do not leave the youth alone. Remove means for self-harm. Ways to prevent suicidal thoughts. First, give treatment for mental health problems. Second, identify high-risk triggers and situation. Third, self-care. Fourth, follow through with prescribed medication. Fifth, do things you enjoy. Sixth, think of personal goals. Get help. No one should ever agree to keep a youth's suicidal thoughts a secret of instead should tell an appropriate caregiving adult such as a parent, teacher, or school psychologist. Parents should seek help from school or community mental health resources as soon as possible. School staff should take the students to a school-employed mental health professional or administrator.
Suicide. We all know that it means ending your own life. It is sometimes a way for people to escape pain or suffering. When someone ends their own life, we say that they died by suicide. In today's age, suicide incident is rapidly increasing, and most of the victims are youth. Mental health experts in the Philippines have voiced alarm about the number of young people committing suicide. Lack of access to mental health care for young Filipinos, particularly in remote areas, is deadly. Attempted youth suicides and deaths have risen sharply during the COVID-19 pandemic, with an increase in suicide-related calls to mental health centers across the country. Today, we will talk about the relation of suicide to the ethical theories and share some possible solutions in having some suicidal thoughts.